The raiders cut my cargo hauler open like a tin of fish. First came the harpoons. They punched through bulkhead steel with a squeal you could feel in your molars, then unfolded into claws that reeled us into the maw of a frigate painted in corpse-ship gray. Grav plates hiccuped. Crates rose off the floor and thumped back down. We'd been hauling algae feed and contraband concert chips to the Jovian bazaars. Guess which line item invited pirates? They poured through the breach in insectile armor, helmets glossy as oil, voices chopped into metallic syllables. I got one good swing with a pry bar before gauntleted fingers closed on my wrist and made the bones ring. Someone laughed. The smell was ozone and burnt sealant and the sweet sour breath of fear leaking out of men trying not to show it. They zipped cuffs around our wrists, marched us down a corridor patched with mismatched plates, through a door that screamed every time it opened. The pirate captain, long-limbed, a necklace of ship tags clinking against his collar, looked me up and down like I was a flawed spare part. "Human," he said, drawing the word out. "Always squeal the prettiest." The hull boomed. Something big striking from outside. The captain's smirk faltered. Pressure doors cycled in a rush. The ceiling panels bulged, dropped with a clatter, and then she came through the smoke like an arrow flicked from a bowstring. Fox ears rose from her helm, canted forward. Her armor was the color of rusted autumn, panels etched with angular runes that caught the emergency strobes. She slid on her boots, low, a blade the length of my forearm humming in her hand. Her eyes were a green so bright they looked illegal. The first two pirates went down without realizing they were dying. The third raised a rifle. She kicked off the wall, twisted midair, flicked the blade, and the rifle fell into two neat halves, while its owner stared at it in confusion as if the laws of matter had betrayed him. "Which of you is Cole Harrigan?" she asked, her voice smooth and amused, words shaped around a predator's patience. I thought about lying. The blade's tip ticked toward me. "That would be me," I said, trying hard not to squeak. She cut my cuffs, hauled me to my feet by the collar, then turned her back to the captain as if he were a bar stool. "You are mine by hunt right," she said to me. "I pulled you from their snare. You owe me your life." "Sure," I said, "because when a fox-eared alien in blood-slick armor says you owe her, you agree. Thank you. We should, go." Her green eyes smiled even as her mouth didn't. "We will, after you accept the debt, and repay it my way." "My way?" She leaned close enough that the edges of her helm brushed my cheek. I smelled cool metal and something faintly floral, like crushed mint. "You will be my shadow," she said, "bound to my hunt until I dismiss you." "And if I say no?" Behind her, the captain found his courage and his gun. She didn't bother to look. "Then you die here between thieves." The blade hummed, and a head thumped to the deck like a dropped melon. "So," she said, as alarms rose to an ear-splitting keen. "Cole Harrigan, will you pay your debt?" "You know," I said, swallowing the strangled sound in my throat, "this seems like a conversation for a quieter room." "No quieter rooms," she said cheerfully, as bullets started whining past. "Only louder decisions." She moved like water over rocks, no wasted motion, no extra breath. Her tail, yes, there was a tail, long and ribbon sleek, swept behind her to counterbalance as she vaulted a fallen crate. I followed because terror makes cowards agile. We sprinted through a corridor scabbed with weld scars. A red light strobed, turning the world into slices of blood. "Name?" I said, because panic makes humans polite. "Tessari Nara," she said. The syllables rolled like a chord. "Tess, if you must reduce things." We hit a pressure door. She slammed a palm to the panel. Her armor spat a cable that ate the lock with a shower of sparks. The door groaned upward, teeth of mangled metal showing. She shoved me through into a chamber full of netted crates and a single shuttle like a beetle with its wings spread. Behind us, heavy boots. Ahead, a different kind of danger. The shuttle had a pirate skull stenciled on its side and a smear of dried blood along the hatch handle. Tessari bared small, sharp teeth. "They stole it from a patrol. We will steal it back." I hesitated. "This is stealing from thieves." "Then we are twice righteous." She grabbed my wrist. My skin fizzed where her glove met it, and pulled me to the hatch. "Give me your hand." "Why?" She pressed the inside of my wrist to a wafer-sized disc on her belt. It was cold for a heartbeat. What did you do to me? I demanded, rubbing the spot. No blood, no mark. Just a tingling that burrowed deeper like a root. Bound you, she said matter-of-factly. Partial mark, enough to keep us from losing each other in the dark. Enough for you to hear me if I whisper, and for me to smell you if you lie. I stared. Smell me if I lie? Her ears twitched, amused. Humans sweeten when they're untrue. Bounded around the corner. A grenade clinked across the deck and rolled toward us, beeping like a polite bomb. Tessari kicked it back with a flick of her heel, then shouldered me through the shuttle hatch. Inside stank of old sweat and fuel. She threw herself into the pilot's couch, fingers dancing over a console bristling with illegal toggles. Strap in, she said. If you're still interested in paying your debt with breathing. I strapped in. The shuttle screamed at us in pirate code it clearly didn't want to obey strangers. Tessari whispered back to it in clicks and curses. The engines coughed. The hull shuddered as the frigate's docking clamps resisted letting us go. Shadow, she said, voice suddenly in my head as if she'd leaned inside my skull. Breathe slower. Your panic makes the mark itch. I did as I was told. The clamps finally gave with a bang that echoed in my rib cage. Tessari shoved the throttle forward. We punched into cold starlight, and the pirate frigate dwindled behind us like a bad idea growing smaller, until the frigate's forward batteries woke up and drew a line of angry light across our path. About that debt, I yelled over the shriek of stressed metal. What exactly does being your shadow mean? Tessari's grin was bright and feral. It means we run. And then we hunt. We did not so much fly as we were flung, the shuttle a bottle rocket with its stick snapped off. Tessari coaxed, no, bullied, the battered craft through debris and tracer fire. The view ahead was a star-salted velvet drape torn by a silver scar where a gas giant's rings cut across the dark. Where are we going? I asked, because asking questions was the only thing keeping my teeth from rattling out. The pirate beams were getting closer, corralling us. She flicked her ears toward a smear of space that looked no different than any other until she tapped the glass, and the nav overlaid a ghostly shape, a storm between moons, a turbulence of dust where gravity made lace. Through the lantern wake, she said. They fear it. I grew up in such places. Because you like dying? Because I like surviving when others don't. I opened my mouth to say something clever and found I'd run out of clever. The ship dove. Gritty particles scraped the hull like rain on a tin roof magnified to cathedral volume. Tessari's tail anchored against the chair leg. Muscles corded along her arms. She became all focus, all angles, and for a breath we were perfectly still inside the storm's tumbling chaos. The pirate frigate hesitated at the edge of the wake. Then it flinched, cowardice dressed in tactical prudence, and peeled away. We didn't cheer. The shuttle chose that moment to announce that it had decided it wanted to be multiple pieces. A panel popped. Sparks crawled like luminous ants. The console went dark, and then returned with a new constellation of warning icons. Tessari hissed between her teeth. Shadow? Cole? Your hands. I offered them like a child being tested for grime. She jerked her chin at a lever that had sheared half through. Hold this at 20 degrees while I bribe the reactor. I grabbed it. It fought back like it wanted to either launch into orbit or stab me in the thigh. Tessari plunged a knife into a maintenance panel with the confidence of someone who regularly stabs expensive things. She scraped contacts. The engines coughed again indignantly, as if clearing their throat to tell us we were idiots. We're not going to make it far, I said. We don't need far, she replied. Just to here. Where's here? She jerked her head at the nav. A new icon winked. It looked like a knife tip pointing into blank space. A place where you will repay me. By holding a lever? Her smile cut sideways. By letting me win an old argument with dead people. Sit tight. The wake spat us out like a seed. The stars changed orientation. We hit a bubble of calm and slid into the shadow of something vast. It wasn't on the charts. It wasn't on any charts. The black shape in front of us was a station the size of a small moon. Architecture like frost patterns, half of it caved in as if a giant had taken a bite. "The sable lantern," Tessari said softly, as the shuttle crept toward an open throat pulsing with faint blue light. "A mausoleum of the first hunters." The shuttle's nav blinked red. "This is an interdicted..." We drifted into the lantern's cavernous dock. Lights woke in a sequence that reminded me of someone stirring from a long nap. The docking clamps curled around our hull like cat paws needing a cushion. Seals engaged with a purr. Tessari stood, stretching in a series of liquid motions that made armor whisper against itself. Up close, I saw that what I'd taken for ornamentation were tally marks cut into her plates, each stroke filled with dark resin. Hunts? Kills? Survivals? She noticed me noticing, and her mouth did that not smile. "Stories I don't tell pirates." "I'm not a pirate." "Then perhaps I'll tell you one." She palmed the hatch. It breathed open. Cold rolled in. The air smelled of ice and old dust, and underneath that, a strange sweetness I couldn't place until it snagged a memory. Orchards after rain on the ridge back home. Apples and iron. The dock was bone white and ribbed, more organic than any human station. Lines curved where I expected angles. Tessari's steps softened. She moved with respect, almost reverence. "My mother told me about places like this," she said. "Bones of the ones who taught. They hunted storms. They hunted sickness. They hunted fear." I followed, arms tight around myself. The partial mark pulsed faintly. A cool thread at my wrist, as if tugging me along. And why bring me? We passed statues whose faces had worn away into anonymity. One had ears like hers. Another had none at all. A third had too many. She touched none of them. At a junction, she paused, sniffed, then veered left through a doorway shaped like a yawning mouth. "Because the lantern answers to voices like yours," she said. "Human throats can sing certain keys we cannot. Metal remembers music." I laughed nervously. That is the most ridiculous sentence I've ever heard. Her ears angled toward me in amusement. "Then prepare to be educated." We entered a chamber the size of a cathedral, if cathedrals had been grown by coral. The floor dropped away to reveal a shaft down which soft blue fog coiled like breath in winter. Around the lip, consoles lay dark and dust-filmed. Tessari brushed one with her knuckles. Runes lit like fireflies. "Say what I say," she instructed. The words she gave me felt like pebbles in my mouth, hard and round and oddly warm. I repeated them, my voice echoing down the shaft, coming back altered as if some presence below had tasted it and added spice. The consoles woke. The blue fog rolled thicker, rising, condensing into a membrane that rippled like a drumskin. Tessari stepped close. The mark in my wrist tightened, then unlocked, letting something thread from her to me and back. A tremor ran through my bones. "Careful," I said, throat raw. "What is that?" "A gate," she said, "to the memory vault. Help me remember, Shadow." We sang together, her voice higher, mine lower, the two notes rubbing against each other until they became a third that made my teeth feel loose. Cymbals flared. The membrane puckered, open like an eyelid. Beyond, not darkness, but something like the idea of a forest rendered in light and geometry. She didn't hesitate. She jumped. I swore, took a breath that filled my chest like a dare, and followed. Falling through light is different from falling through air. There's no wind. Only a sensation of being peeled and examined, and strangely, approved. We landed without impact on a surface that wasn't there. Around us, structures grew and ungrew, branches resolving into ladders, into waveforms, into words I couldn't read. Tessari stood perfectly still, ears flicking as if listening to a frequency that didn't involve sound. "There," she whispered, and pointed. A shape congealed, a hunting camp rendered in crystal diagrams. A tall Vashari stood over a fire that was a cluster of equations. Beside her, a human man laughed, head thrown back, the sound picked out in shining glyphs. "What am I looking at?" I asked. Goose-flesh rippling. "My mother," Tessari said, "and the last human she trusted." She stepped forward, hand lifting as if to touch. The image brightened, and the human's laughter turned into a phrase, a warning that skittered over my skin like cold insects. It said my family name. It said it like a threat. or a promise. "Play it again," I whispered, though there were no buttons to press. The vault responded to need, not commands. The syllables rolled out clean, Harrigan, in a voice that had the easy arrogance of someone who thinks trouble is fun until it stops being funny. "Who is he?" I asked, throat tight. Tessari's eyes had gone not bright. "A scavenger, a friend, a betrayer." Her tail stilled. "They hunted the regions." He thought it would salve his conscience. She looked at me. The partial mark vibrated, and for a second I smelled smoke and wildflower honey and something like sorrow. It did not. The image rolled, scenes unfurling like a story my bones already knew. My great uncle had vanished somewhere between Jupiter and the rim. Family gatherings turned awkward when his name came up. The vault showed him shaking hands with a faceless envoy. It showed Tessari's mother counting those same tally marks I'd seen on Tess's armor with a knife point, one more added for one more beast taken before the betrayal snapped shut like a steel trap. "Why show me this?" I demanded, heat rising with shame that wasn't mine. "To say my blood runs crooked? To say you get to decide if it runs straighter?" Tessari's voice sharpened. "Debt doesn't care about which ancestor earned it. It cares about who has the spine to pay." I found myself bristling. "And your demand? Be your shadow until you say you're satisfied? How do I know that isn't just you painting over old anger with new work?" She tilted her head, ears angled in a way that looked like respect. "You don't. That is the trick. Trust is always a hunt. It can run." Before I could reply, the vault shivered. A tremor ran through the geometry, visible as a ripple in the trees of light. Tessari hissed, ears flattening. "They found us." "Who? Pirates?" "No. Worse." She pulled me hard enough to spin me. The membrane we'd fallen through was fluttering. Beyond it, dark shapes moved. Sleek, small, too many. Not ships. Drones. Hunter kites. The vault didn't like them. Symbols sparked. The membrane wrinkled like skin touched with cold. A voice spoke from everywhere at once. A language like bells. It wasn't words. It was intent. "Leave." "Shadow," Tessari said, letting a note of command harden the air. "Run where I run." She plunged toward the open eye. I went with her, shocked at the ease of it, shocked at how some part of me liked following, liked the simple clarity of a predator's certainty. We fell up. The dock was chaos. The drones had poured through vents and seams like smoke, glossy black things with wings that folded and unfolded like blades. They had no faces, only a single red aperture that tightened when it looked at you. One turned toward me. The mark in my wrist shrieked like fingernails on glass. Tessari cut it in half. It fell in two condolent smooth pieces, metal singing. Another came. She kicked off the wall, landed on the ceiling, pushed off again. For a breath, she was everywhere. "Who sends drones into a tomb?" I panted. "Someone who wants what sleeps here," she snarled. She threw me a compact tube. "Point and press. And think of living." I pointed and pressed. The tube coughed a stuttering cone of noise so thick I felt it as pressure in my teeth. The drone's wings stuttered and it flopped onto the deck where Tessari's blade made a sentence of it. We sprinted for the shuttle. Alarms keened. The vault. If such a thing could panic, push like a weather front, a pressure of get out that made the hair on my arm stand. Tessari dove through the hatch. I stumbled in after. The drones hit the hull like hail. "Who are they?" I demanded as the shuttle surged off the clamps. Tessari's eyes were hard coins. "The Regent's hounds." "Then we're not running from pirates anymore." "No," she agreed, as space opened like a wound ahead of us. "Now we're running from an empire. Are you still my shadow, Cole Harrigan?" Saying yes felt like signing a contract written in lightning. Saying no felt like curling into a ball and waiting for a boot. Between those two, I had always been the kind of idiot who picked the road with sharp rocks. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how solid it sounded. "Good," Tessari replied, as if I'd passed a test she hadn't told me I was taking. "Because we are going to bite something very big and very bad." The shuttle tore open a hole through dark... No, not a hole, a thread where reality had been stitched twice and could be unpicked if you knew how to tease it. Tessari did. The nav didn't so much plot a course as invent one. We slipped into a dimension that smelled like hot copper and old storms. Inside the strange quiet, she allowed herself to breathe. The tension flowed out of her spine in increments. Her tail draped over her thigh. "My pack," she said into the hum of the engines, the words falling like stones in a pond. There were 5 of us once, sisters in oath if not in blood. What happened? The regent. He wants our territory, our rights, our old names. He buys pirates like meat and throws them at us until we bite warriors instead of law. My pack went to kill a debt that kept not dying. You were the only one who came back. She nodded once. I'd appreciate less spilling. Then stop feeling so loudly. I would have protested, but the nav chimed, gentle, like a polite throat, clear. Tessari's ears flicked forward. We're threading into a quiet lane. Hounds don't run well there. But we must talk about my demand. Right. That. Be your shadow. Run. Hunt. Bite big things. How long are we saying? Until the hunt ends. That is not an answer. It's the only one that matters. And the shocking part? I said dryly. Because be my sidekick isn't exactly a scandal. Her mouth curved. Not sidekick. Companion. Under our law, a life pulled from a snare belongs to the rescuer until the balance is paid, and balance does not repay in coin. It repays in a bond, a legal one. I stared. You're proposing? Tessari actually laughed. It wasn't cruel or kind. It was delighted by the mess of the moment. Oh, human, do not make it a romance. It is a war contract. A marriage under Vashari trickster law binds 2 hunters so their testimony is one voice in court. I need such a voice to challenge the regent's puppet matriarch. No one in my clans will stand with me. They like their throats uncut. So you saved me to marry me. For politics. And to make you bait. For strategy. Ah, I said, relief and alarm locking antlers. There it is. Tessari leaned back, ears flattened in mock sympathy. Do not worry. There are rights. There is no touching unless invited. There are witnesses, and the only fluids spilled are wine and sometimes blood, but only the symbolic kind. That's somehow worse in a different way. You could refuse. And then I go back to pirates or drones, or an empire that wants whatever I can sing to their machines. Her eyes met mine, too bright in the dim. Yes. The nav chimed again. We were easing back into normal null like a swimmer surfacing beneath a gray sky. Ahead, space thickened into the glitter of a traffic spine and the prismatic shimmer of a trade station's shields. Decide before we dock, she said. If you choose no, I will drop you at a port with a decent bar and a terrible view. And then I will go kill the regent's hounds alone. She flicked a switch. The shuttle's transponder changed its voice the way a liar changes his smile. The station's shields winked an invitation. She looked out at the stars as if they were a map only she could read. Shadow, she said softly, do you hunt with me? I thought about the pirate's laughter, the way the captain had rolled my name in his mouth like a candy he would savor when he bit down. I thought about the vault and my great-uncle's easy grin turning into a knife. I thought about Tessari's tally marks and her pack's empty places. I hunt, I said. And the word lifted something off my chest like a hand, taking away a weight I'd convinced myself was my own. Tessari's shoulders loosened. The little sigh she let out was so small she probably hoped I hadn't heard it. Good. Then we do this properly. The trade station, Cycler 9, was an ugly jewel, a cylinder bristling with docking spines, its outer hull seamed with scratch-patch welds and graffiti. Vendors hawked fried comet eels and synthetic lace. A singer with a larynx modulator sent a ribbon of song twining through the air. Children chased it, mouths open, trying to catch the notes. We threaded through the bustle. Tessari walked with predator casualness, not stealthy, just right with the space around her, and somehow people moved without knowing they had until she was past. She led me into an alley where the light went green, and then up a flight of stairs into a temple so small I would have missed the door. Inside, the air was cold and still. The floor was chewed stone, the walls stitched with old flags. A priestess sat on a stool that looked older than the station, embroidering something that might have been a star map or a recipe for revenge. She had fox ears too, white with age. She did not look up. "You bring me astray when the regent's eyes comb every lane," she said to Tessari in a voice like sand. "You have always liked making trouble in quiet places, little knife." "Mother Ash," Tessari said, bowing with genuine respect. "I bring a debt I want braided into law." The priestess finally glanced my way. Her eyes were not green, but a gray so precise it took me a second to realize most gray is a messy average. "Human," she said. "Your sweat has the sharp edge of a story walking itself into a corner." Her gaze flicked to my wrist and the invisible mark. Her ear twitched. "Ah, she bound you sloppy in a rush." Mother Ash's smile was too quick to be kind. "There is only one term that matters, that you know what you say yes to." She stood. Her joints clicked. She touched the air. Threads of dust drifted in a shape like a net. "Witnesses?" she asked Tessari. Tessari tilted her head. "I have my shadow. I have you. I have the dead." She nodded toward the flags. "That is enough." Mother Ash's ears flattened, not quite approval. She took a knife from the altar. Its handle was worn like a river stone. She pricked Tessari's thumb and then mine. She dotted blood onto the dust net. The motes drank it like thirsty animals. A whisper rose, not words, more like the intention of words. "Repeat," Mother Ash said. We did. The vow tasted like iron and bitter fruit. "I bind my hunt to yours until it ends. I join my testimony to yours until law is satisfied. I stand as your shadow where you cannot go, and you stand as mine where I cannot stand. I keep your secrets as my own. I will not leave you in snares." When it was done, the dust net folded itself, sank into the knife blade, and was gone. The priestess wiped the blade on her sleeve. "Done," she said. "Badly timed. Perfectly foolish. It may be the only thing that works." Footsteps pounded on the stairs outside. Tessari's ears went knife-sharp. Mother Ash sighed, as if annoyed with the universe for its lack of patience, and plucked her needle up again. "Your regent sends a hound to sniff us?" Tessari asked. "No," Mother Ash said. "Your matriarch sends a leash." The door blew inward. Light flared. Reflex threw me behind Tessari. A squad in lacquered armor spilled in. At their head came a Vashari whose fur was coal-black and perfect, whose tail curled like a question spoken in venom. "Cousin," she said to Tessari, smiling like polished stone, "you always arrive when I most wish you wouldn't." The black-furred Vashari wore power like a perfume you pretended not to notice. Her face was pretty in the way of knives arranged on velvet. She raised an elegant hand. The squad fanned out to either side, not quite aiming weapons, but remembering exactly where they were. "Vir," Tessari said flatly, "the matriarch's favorite puppet." Vir's smile didn't move. "And you, the family embarrassment. I'd ask what you're doing in a broom closet with a human, but Mother Ash only binds one kind of fool's bargain in her chapel." Mother Ash didn't look up from her embroidery. "I bind what has to be bound, and I mend what idiots tear." Vir's tail swayed. "You cannot mend the hole Tessari makes when she refuses to kneel." She tilted her head at me, curiosity sharp as a pin. "Human, what have you let her stick into you? Besides hooks for pulling you along." I lifted my chin, aware the move was more defiance than wisdom. "Nothing I can't pull back out." "Oh," Vir said, amused. "He has teeth. Don't worry. We'll break them gently." Tessari slid half a step so that if Vir moved, she would have to step over a line even she could not pretend wasn't there, the temple threshold. "State your errand," Tessari said, "before your courage melts with your manners." "The matriarch summons you," Vir said. "And your husband." She savored the word like poison. "To answer for illegal vows and for trespassing a sealed archive." "You mean the lantern," Tessari said without inflection. Vir's eyelids drooped, bored. "Call your tombs whatever makes you feel holy. And if we refuse?" Vir's smile widened a notch. "Then your blood will polish the floor of this quaint little shrine. Your choice. But do consider, I would love a law show." We so rarely get to see you pretend to be a person instead of a knife. Mother Ash set her needle down with a tiny click. There will be no blood in my house, little Veer. Veer dipped her head, mock pious. Then, I suppose we will go politely. Her gaze slid to me. Bring your human. He will be funny. We walked. The squad bracketed us like bookends. Tessari kept her hands loose, the way you do when everything in you wants to make them hard. The partial mark ticked in my wrist like a second, smaller heart. Breathe, she sent, a whisper across the tether. Hard to. With your cousin threatening to redecorate the temple with us, I thought back, and startled when I felt her amusement like the brush of a tail. The matriarch's hall was built for spectacle. Light spilled like molten metal. People watched from balconies with a hunger that made my skin feel too tight. On the dais sat the matriarch, sleek, silver, eyes a cool blue that no Vashari I'd seen bore naturally. The regent's hand was always careful. His allies wore their treason on their faces. Tessari Nara, the matriarch purred, you make a habit of dramatics. Tessari bowed just enough to be called. The hall rustled. The matriarch's eyebrows rose a millimeter. Well, at least he can speak. Veer stepped forward, savoring her moment. They bound vows without registry, she recited. They desecrated a prohibited site. They carry contraband marks between them and sing to machines that do not belong to them. Mother Ash's voice floated from the doorway where she apparently had followed us, uninvited and unimpressed. I registered the vow, she said. With the dead, who were here long before you were, matriarch. The matriarch ignored her. Tessari, you always did collect pets and lost causes, but this one is special. The regent has put a price on him. The hall breathed in as one large animal. Tessari did not move. Because he can open the lantern, she said. Because he sang what your voices cannot. Because his name tastes like old debt, the matriarch said, and her smile showed too many teeth. Tell me, Cole Harrigan, do you like owing? I prefer paying, I said. Good, she purred. You can start by kneeling. I made myself meet her gaze. Behind it, I saw distance and calculation and a hint of tiredness, as if the crown pinched. No, I said, and heard the word land with a clean sound like a cup set down on a table before an argument. The matriarch's tail swayed, slow, lazy. Then we'll cut those knees off. Tessari's hand found mine. Warm. Solid. Shadow, she said softly. On my word. A bell rang, not in the hall. Somewhere behind the walls, a tone that made teeth ache. The matriarch's ears twitched, annoyance fracturing her poise. Veer's smile stumbled. What is that? I whispered. Tessari's eyes were bright as knives in sunlight. Hounds, she said. The regents are here. He didn't trust his puppet to hold us. He sent his own leash. The hall rippled. Courtiers turned their heads in a pretty synchronized flinch. The side door swung open, and the drones I'd seen in the lantern flowed in like a shadow learning to walk. Between them came people, humans, Vashari, a lizard-thin alien I couldn't name, wearing the regent's crest like a stain. The man leading them had a face that had forgotten how to smile. He wore a uniform engineered to look both noble and practical. Someone had told him he'd look trustworthy in it, and he had believed them because belief is easier than mirrors. He glanced at the matriarch the way you check a leash's knot. We assume custody of the human, he said, by regent writ. The matriarch's disdain was perfect theater. You march into my hall like a debt collector into a wedding. How vulgar. Your taste is not our concern, the man said evenly. Our concern is the artifact key assembled from an illicit vow. Deliver the human. Tessari's thumb traced a circle on the back of my hand. It might have been an accident. It might have been a ritual. Shadow, she said, so low only I could hear. Do you want to be taken and peeled like fruit? Or do you want to jump off a cliff with me and hope the wind remembers our names? I hate heights, I said. I hate cages. She released my hand. In the same breath, Mother Ash's voice rose, surprisingly strong. Under old law, she said, A vow freshly bound may challenge any claim laid upon the bound if the challenge is made before the vows chill. Everyone blinked at her like she'd begun reciting soup recipes. Veer snorted. Old law is for campfires and songs, crone. Mother Ash's ears went flat. Old law is for when new law sells your throat. Tessari didn't give the hall time to choose sides. She yanked the knife from her belt and slammed it into the polished floor so hard a crack snapped outward like lightning. I challenge, she said, voice ringing. I challenge the matriarch, who has forgotten which stories feed us and which stories eat us. I challenge her right to let the regent take my shadow. The matriarch's smile snapped like a hair. Denied. You can't deny a challenge made under the old law, someone muttered from a balcony. Another voice. She invoked Mother Ash. That counts. And a third. Shut up before they hear you. The regent's man lifted a hand, weary authority. None of this is relevant, he said. We. Tessari moved. Not toward him. Toward me. She took my face in her hands and touched her forehead to mine. The mark flared white-hot against my wrist. For a heartbeat, the hall vanished. There was only motion. A wind like a laugh. A cliff. A leap. We didn't move, but something in us did. When the world returned, everything felt shifted half a degree, as if gravity had found a new angle. Glass in the windows sang. The drones staggered back a fraction, apertures narrowing. What did you do? I breathed. Tessari's eyes were very bright. Tessari grabbed the knife from the floor and threw it. It went through the drone's single red eye with obscene neatness. Chaos did not explode. It unfolded, precise as choreography. The regent's man cursed. Courtiers scattered like starlings. Veer vanished with predatory economy, leaving her insults behind like perfume. Shadow! Tessari barked. Left. I pivoted left. A drone knifed toward me, wings buzzing a note that made my stomach flip. I raised Mother Ash's dust net knife, not so much a weapon as a promise welded to metal. And the drone stuttered, confused, as if it recognized something it hadn't planned on recognizing. I slashed. Sparks. Pain sang up my arm, but the thing fell smoking. We bolted. The hall's high doors were very far away until they weren't. Tessari smashed a shock baton into a guard's temple. He folded like paper. We threw ourselves into a corridor that had the decency to be ugly instead of grand. The partial mark thrilled, pouring an edge into my senses. The world crisped up. Air currents, footfalls, the electric itch of a camera's stare. Where? I gasped. Somewhere that hates callers, she said. Mother Ash knows a door. Mother Ash will be fine? I asked before my brain wrapped its knuckles. She's a weed, Tessari said. She grows in stone. We skidded down a stair, nearly collided with a cleaning drone that beeped in a front, spilled into an atrium where traders hawked hot broth and illegal biographies. The regent's hound spilled in another door, and everyone had a different opinion about whether to scream or keep eating. The world tilted toward mayhem again. Tessari snatched a bottle from a vendor, tossed credits that glowed as they spun. She smashed the bottle on a pillar. It smelled like spice and fuel and poor decisions. She touched the lick of flame to a line of incense offerings. Fire walked along the ribbon like a cat. The hounds hesitated, calculating combustion versus orders. That was enough. We ducked behind a statue of a saint whose eyes had been replaced with camera lenses. The wall behind it was the wrong color by half a shade. Tessari slapped a palm against it. It sighed and slid. We ducked into darkness. The wall whispered shut. The sound of the world went away like a mouth being covered. Tessari exhaled, long, shaky, then laughed, sudden, wild. Good, she said. Now the real hunt starts. In the dark? I said. Because the dark was very dark. In the tunnels where nobody's justice reaches. She took my hand in the blind and squeezed once, hard enough to hurt, like proof. Stay close. From behind the wall, muffled, came a voice. The regent's man, cool and patient. They sealed themselves into the marrow, he said. Good. Rats are easier to smoke out when they choose the walls. Then we better learn to breathe smoke, Tessari murmured. I tried to joke and found I'd left my joke where the light was. What now? She smiled in the black. I felt it rather than saw it, warmth against my cheek from her breath. Now, she said, we turn from being hunted to being the hunters. The marrow wasn't a tunnel so much as a decision rendered in negative space. The station builders had carved arteries through Cycler 9's bones, then left an entirely different set the station's squatters had layered in over decades. The walls were a language. Old welds, new patches, chewing gum repairs, bite marks from a time something had decided metal tasted good. Keep your head down, Tessari whispered, and then in my mind through the mark, not your actual head, your thinking head. I tried. Thoughts wanted to rise and look around. They always do. She moved fast, but not thoughtless, trailing fingers over surfaces like a musician tuning a room. At one junction, she paused, nostrils flaring. Oil. Fresh. 3. No. 4. 1 heavy. Meaning? Meaning we go another way. She dropped into a side passage that required us to crawl. My shoulder brushed her boot. A spark jumped through the mark like static. Sorry, I muttered. Don't be. I like knowing where you are. The casualness was a layer over something more careful. We emerged into a maintenance chamber where a fan mouth rotated lazily and did nothing. Tessari slid to the floor with a grace that annoyed me even as it impressed. She worked at a grating. Help? She said. I did. The screws squealed. The grate lifted, revealing a shaft slick with condensation, and the strangely sweet orchard smell again. What is that? I whispered. Coolant, she said, and old prayers. Smells like apples. We slid. Halfway, light strobed below, and voices bounced up, hounds drilling without conviction into walls. They hadn't found the marrow's whispers yet. Tessari put 2 fingers against my wrist where the mark pulsed. The touch dialed my fear down like she'd found its volume knob. I didn't like that she could. I liked that she did. We popped out in an old docking ring, this one unused since someone decided bolts were unnecessary. It tilted 5 degrees to the left, and everything that could roll had chosen a corner to die in. Tessari stepped over lost bottles, a child's toy with bitten ears, a coil of knotted wire. She crossed to a rust, striped hatch, and rapped a rhythm. Pause. Rap. Rap, rap. The hatch peeped at us, an eye like a camera lens but wetter. Open, Tekka, Tessari said. I have a husband and a problem. Same thing in my experience, said a voice like a smoker's chuckle. The hatch unsealed. A woman in a coat made of patches and promises looked us up and down. She was human, but time and grit had given her edge. You owe me a day where you don't bring a storm, Tess. I'll buy you a storm rug, Tessari said, slipping past and pulling me after. Tekka's place was a wrench in room form, things on shelves that might explode if put too near other things on shelves. It smelled like grease and herbs, a cat that wasn't a cat. 6 legs, indifferent, watched us with one eye open. Regent's hounds? Tekka asked. I heard bells. Bells and lies, Tessari said. We need a ship that doesn't wake their toys. Do I look like a charity? Tekka's gaze moved to me. And this is the husband? Congratulations and condolences. What do you want? I asked, because Tekka felt like a person you didn't haggle with so much as you admitted the weather to. She considered. A song, she said finally. I'm told you sing doors open. I blinked. I croaked some syllables in a tune. Same thing. Sing one of my engines back to hope. It's been sullen since I swapped her heart. Do that, and I'll find you a path between claws. She flipped a tarp off a machine that looked like a blender designed by people who hated other people. I glanced at Tessari. She nodded. He can. The lantern woke for him. Your engine will preen. I approached the thing with the same confidence you approach a stray dog with interesting teeth. I put my hand on the housing. It vibrated, low and resentful. I watched Tessari from the corner of my eye as she watched me, ears forward, a little smile she didn't know she had. "What did you sing?" Tekka asked, leaning against a bench. "Words I didn't know could be words," I said. "I'll try. This." I let sound flicker out, not quite a note, more a pressure, a shape. The engine changed its vibration, curious. I went a shade higher, then flattened, then whispered. Something clicked inside. The smell of ozone shifted to the smell of clean rain. The engine exhaled. Lights climbed its spine. Tekka's eyebrows tried to climb off her face. "Well, I'll be an honest politician," she muttered. "It likes you." "Engines and orphans," Tessari said. "They know whose hands want to keep them." Tekka rummaged in a drawer. "Then I'll keep my bargain. Slot 7, back of the ring. A courier sled with an attitude. She doesn't look like much because she isn't. That's why she survives." She tossed Tessari a chip. "Codes. And a warning. Veer's been sniffing my door. She wants your skin on the matriarch's steps. Tell her to come get it," Tessari said, sliding the chip into a pocket. She touched Tekka's shoulder, and they did a brief, rough ritual of affection that some cultures would have called a hug, and theirs called not dying alone. We left through an exit that was a piece of wall until Tessari pushed in the right place. The corridor beyond hummed with the quiet of things that lasted because they kept better secrets than people. "Nice tricks," I whispered. "Not tricks," she murmured back. "Stories we don't share with the Regent." We hit slot 7. The courier sled looked like a skateboard with delusions of grandeur. Tessari ran a hand over it. "Hello, ugly," she said with fondness. "Take us somewhere they can't follow." The sled blinked an ancient display. Tessari grinned. "Good girl." We strapped in. The sled shivered, lifted, slid into the lane that ran the station's spine. The engine spooled into a whine I felt more in my teeth than my ears. The Marrow's murmurs faded. "Where to?" I asked, as we shot down a gray throat toward a circle of light. "Home," Tessari said. "Where I make my challenge. Where you become a scandal the stories will chew for years." She showed her teeth. "And where we will teach the Regent to bleed." The sled burst into open space, small amid the clutter of station traffic. "Yes," Tessari said with relish. "Now the hunt truly starts." We threaded the trade lanes like mice using the seams in a floorboard. The courier sled knew how to be forgettable. Its engine note was a sigh. Its transponder flickered between being a refuse hauler, a priest's car, and once, hilariously, a vending cart. Tessari flitted between identities with the glee of a trickster stealing hats at a parade. Beyond the lanes lurked Oloran, the Vashari home system. The star there was old gold, fat and fond of its own light. Worlds swam around it like fish, some sleek and blue, some scarred and armored with cities. Tessari's map uncurled a ribbon of coordinates that looped not to the obvious capital station, but to a place like a comma too small for empires to bother with. "We're not going to the big seat," I said. "Not first. First we go where the old law takes precedent because the old law has a longer memory and a worse temper." Oloran 3, which her people called Room, rose out of the dark, wearing a sea like a cloak. The continents were long and thin, like spines. Clouds lay over them like brushstrokes. We descended through weather that tasted like salt and voltage. The landing pad was a shelf cut into a cliff. Waves burst below in white applause. Wind dragged fingers through Tessari's hair as we climbed out, made her ears flick irritably. She breathed in deep, and something in her posture softened. Home makes even predators look briefly defenseless. She led me through a forest the wind combed endlessly, leaves making a sound like many voices telling an old joke. The scent was resin and wet stone and the faint musk of animals we did not see, but who saw us. "You grew up here," I said. "Close. Farther inland where the cliffs curve like a sleeping bag. And your family—" "Pack," she corrected gently. "Family is a word with a narrower mouth. There were markers along the path, knotted strings left by someone's hand, carved bones hung from branches, a piece of glass with the edges worn smooth by water." Tessari touched one as she passed the way a priest might touch a wall. We came to a longhouse grown out of living wood. Smoke bled from a vent in a spiral that made the sky look nearer. Inside, light made from fiber and fungus pooled warm as broth. People looked up, and in the space between seeing and deciding how to feel, I understood the math. Who loved Tessari, who wanted her thrown back to sea, who didn't care except for what the story would taste like later. A woman with fur the color of old brass and eyes that no longer saw stood, cane in hand. Tessari bowed. "Aunt," she said, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I smell the city on you," the woman said, coming forward, and the matriarch's sour perfume. Her cane thumped my ankle gently. And human sweat. "Cole Harrigan," Tessari said. "My bond." The woman sniffed. Then a smile like a knife cleaving a pumpkin split her face. "Oh, little one," she chuckled. "You've come to throw rocks at the Regent with nothing but a foxtail and a man who looks like he came here by accident." "I came here on purpose," I said, drawing my shoulders back. "Even funnier," she said, delighted. "I am Cyrith. I led hunts before your grandparents' were ideas looking for mouths." "We invoke old law," Tessari said, bracing. "We challenge the matriarch and, through her, the Regent's leash." The murmurs went sharp. Someone hissed like a kettle left too long. Cyrith rapped the floor with her cane. "Then you'd better be ready to bleed without flinching," she said, not unkind. "Old law likes blood." Tessari nodded. "We have a vow. We have a key the Regent wants. We have a name that tastes like a broken tooth in his mouth." She looked at me, and the barest flicker of apology moved through her expression. "We also have bait." "You are proud bait," Cyrith said approvingly to me. "I've seen rabbits with less spine. Good. You will need it. The challenge must be public. The matriarch cannot pretend she did not hear it if we sing it to the cliffs." "So we sing?" "We sing to the law until it wakes and asks who has the nerve to call it." Cyrith's sightless eyes found Tessari. "And you have the nerve." "Always," Tessari murmured, but the word had a shadow. She glanced at the wall where 5 knotted cords hung, red, teal, deep black, bright white, dull rust, her pack. One had a knot cut instead of tied. She touched that one as if expecting it to warm under her fingers. It did not. We walked to the cliff edge as the sky peeled into evening. The sea skin went from blue to pewter. Tessari stepped onto a stone that had been stepped on by people whose names were now just the way the wind bent around rocks. She lifted her chin and sang. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't meant to be. Cliff caves lit one by one like eyes opening. Figures emerged, some Vashari, some not, wrapped in cloaks that had seen more weather than the station's walls. They came and sat in a crescent, watching, weight of attention heavy as a hand. Cyrith raised her cane. "Speak," she said. Tessari spoke. She spoke of the Regent's drones in the lantern, of the matriarch's blue eyes and new law that forgot old teeth. She spoke of her pack and the empty places where laughter had been. She spoke of a human who sang doors and whose name the vault remembered like a stain. She did not make herself a hero. She made herself a knife wanting a better hand. When she finished, the wind had gone elsewhere to gossip about us. The sea breathed in. Cyrith's cane stamped once. "Challenge recorded," she said. "Witnessed. Heard." She turned her face toward the inland where the capital lay fat on its comforts. "Tomorrow at Sunspear," she said, "you throw your voice into the matriarch's court and see if it breaks glass." "And if it doesn't?" I asked softly. "Then metal breaks something else," Cyrith said. She smiled in my direction. "Practice running in circles, human. It helps in courts." We turned back toward the longhouse. A shadow moved near the tree line where the forest thickened. A sliver of black against black. Tessari's ears cut the air. She drew me sideways, and the arrow whispered past where my throat had just been. "Down," she barked, already moving. I dropped as the second arrow kissed the air above. The wind grabbed the third and threw it back into the trees. There was no fourth. Whoever shot them had already spooled back into the dark. Tessari crouched, blade out. Her voice was thin with fury. "Veer," she said. She couldn't wait for morning. From the trees came a soft laugh that didn't belong to any person I wanted to know. "Sleep well, cousin," Ver's voice called, smug and far. "If you can." We didn't sleep. The longhouse breathed around us, a living creature that accepted us as fleas beneath its fur. Cyrus sat by the hearth thread, her cane across her knees, eyes closed like a door propped only by habit. The rest of the house pretended to drowse while ears stayed pricked and hands curled around tools that could be, if needed, weapons. Tessari paced and didn't call it pacing. Her tail wrote cursive agitation in the air. I sat on a woven mat that smelled of salt and smoke and watched the door the way prey watches a bush it knows hide something that just forgot how to yawn. When the wind pushed against the house, the walls sighed, and every sigh wanted to be a footstep. "This is foolish," I said finally, because the quiet was gnawing my nerves down to glittering little points. Challenging power in their own hall with their own rules. "Not their rules," she said, not stopping. "Not tomorrow. Tomorrow we drag old law into their clean floors on dirty boots. And they'll just let us? They must. Or they say out loud what everyone knows in their bones, that the regent's leash is in their mouths. Hunters hate admitting they've been collared. I found myself smiling despite the grind of fear. "You're angry," I said. "I am focused," she corrected, too quickly. "You're afraid," I tried, "only of wasting breath." The mark pulsed, a low drum under my skin. "You could have let me go," I said quietly. "On Cycler 9. You could have handed me over to the regent's man and walked away and lived longer." "I don't like living long if I'm not living right." She glanced at me. Her eyes were not bright now, not knives. They were the color of forest pools at dusk. "And besides, I didn't pull you from a snare to throw you into a cage. I'm not my mother's human." The words hung, a rope coiling in the space between us. I reached and touched the place on my wrist where the mark hid. "We can still lose," I said. "I've lost before." "So have I," she said. "We learn how to lose better. That's all any hunt is." A scraping against the outer wall. Tessari's head snapped. Cyrus's eyes opened. The scrape came again, light, as if fingers were walking. Tessari moved toward it, soundless as thought. She pressed her ear against the living wood. She smiled, very small and very unpleasant. "What?" I whispered. She tapped the wall twice, slow. From outside, between the cat-like steps, came a smell. Pepper and rot. Poison. Veer had sent not herself, but something that could wriggle, where Veer would not risk crawling. Tessari's smile sharpened. She reached into a nook by the door and drew out a horn that had been bone and was now instrument. She lifted it to her mouth and blew a note so low the floorboards understood it better than our ears. The living wood flinched. The longhouse's roots tightened. Outside, the scrape became a skitter. Then, "She grows afraid," Tessari said. She set the horn down with reverence. "Tomorrow she throws a bigger beetle." "A hound?" I asked. "A word lie," Cyrus said, amused. "Which is heavier when you try to pick it up than when you only listen?" When false dawn grayed the windows, we ate in silence. Bread that cracked like ice. A stew that tasted like undertows. Tessari strapped on armor I'd not seen, older, less pretty, angles softened by use, straps stained with lives. She combed oil through her tail with quick, efficient strokes, then braided beads into the fur close to the base. Each bead had a scratch. I didn't ask their names. "Am I armed?" I asked. "Or am I a poem you wave at the court?" "You're a blade they don't know how to sheath," she said. She handed me the dust-net knife. I tucked it under my belt and prayed neither to old law nor knew that I wouldn't be asked to throw it. We stepped out into air that had decided to remember winter. Cold bit cartilage. Breath smoked. The path to the cliff had been swept of leaves by hands that wanted no surprises beyond the obvious. People fell in behind us as we walked, not touching, not talking, but present in the way a pack surrounds what it refuses to let go. At the cliff, the caves lit again. The challenge had drawn watchers who had not watched in years. Some eyes were kind, some were knives, some were simply tired of pretending this wasn't happening. We sang. The wind grudgingly carried our voices inland. Far off, bells that weren't bells answered. The sky put on a hard blue. We went. The capital was a wheel of stone and glass built around a spire that had decided water should climb instead of fall. The court lay embedded like a pearlescent cyst. Veer stood at the door, dressed in righteousness. She smiled so sweetly I could taste the arsenic. "Cousin," she crooned. "Welcome to the theater." "Break a leg," I said. She leaned in just enough for her breath to touch my cheek. "Thank you. We plan to break yours." We stepped into an echoing chamber where light fell wrong, and the matriarch looked bored, and the regent's man was already waiting with a stack of documents that could choke an ox. Tessari lifted her head. The beads in her tail clicked like a prayer turning into teeth. "Speak," the matriarch said, lazy. Tessari opened her mouth, and I felt the mark flare as something else opened too, above us, behind us, through us, a door that had not been there a breath ago, and through it not drones, not men, but something older and uglier and closer to a story told to scare children into not walking alone. The court looked up. The regent's man finally smiled. Tessari's first word came out as a growl. "Run," she said. Not to me, but to the crowd. They didn't. The thing that had learned to sniff us from Cycler 9 stretched through the hole in the world and considered us with too many mouths. "What did you pull after us?" I said, horror dry in my mouth. "Not me," Tessari whispered, as the court became a forest of gasps. "Him." She meant the regent. And the regent had brought his favorite pet to heal us both. It squeezed through the rent in the air like oil, remembering it used to be a snake. Not flesh, geometry with bad intentions. Mouths butted along its length and unbutted, lips made of wire, teeth made of equations. The nearest of its red irises dilated when it tasted the vow between Tessari and me. The court froze the way prey freezes when it realizes the grass was never grass. "Back," Tessari snarled, her voice booming like a drum hit from the inside. The beads at the base of her tail clicked madly, throwing tiny reflections up the white stone walls. Cyrith. Yes, Cyrith had come, uninvited as weather, thumped her cane on the threshold, and began to hum the deep, rude note that made old houses stand harder against storms. Veer faded into the wings with that too pleasant walk cowards learn from mirrors. The matriarch rose, hands spread as if she could press the air back into behaving. The regent's man simply smiled and drew a rod from his belt. It was the sort of object bureaucrats used when they wanted to pretend a leash was a baton. "Cole," Tessari breathed, the word skimming along the mark into my blood. "It hunts bonds, not meat. Sing its hunger crooked." "How?" My tongue was cotton. The thing's shadow fell over us, cold as cellar air. "Make the bond lie. Then make it true again." I didn't understand until I did. I let fear slither into my voice, not the scream, but the hiss before. I sang, not words, shapes, suggesting our vow frayed, suggesting distance, suggesting we had never touched our foreheads together in a room full of knives. The creature wavered, mouths tasting. The regent's man frowned, as if paperwork had just refused to file itself. He lifted the rod. Symbols climbed it like ants. "Recall," he said. "No," Tessari said, and threw me. We slammed into the base of the water spire. The climbing river hissed past our shoulders. Tessari's claws bit stone. My fingers bit nothing and got away with it. The Crown-Maw lunged, teeth like numbers trying to subtract us. Cyrith's hum deepened. The court woke from its pretty paralysis and discovered it could scream. "Up," Tessari said. I grabbed a seam, hauled, sang flat to pull the beast a step wrong. It bit a column. The column bled light and, insulted, fell on it. Tessari's beads flashed. She plucked one free with her teeth, spat it at the spire. It stuck, flared, became a knot in the water. "What?" "Old trick," she panted. "Make a river remember net." The water thickened into a lattice of liquid rope. The Crown-Maw slammed into it. For a heartbeat it held, and in that heartbeat Tessari looked down at Veer with all her teeth. "Tell your leash holder he should bring a bigger pet," she called. Veer's smile thinned to a paper cut. She lifted a hand as if to swear innocence, and instead drew it across her throat, promise or prophecy. Below, the water net shivered. The lattice lines bowed, then snapped with the sound of harp strings breaking under a giant's thumb. The Crown-Maw split, not in half, worse, into 3 thinner snakes, each with more mouths than the last. "Run," Tessari said, and the water behind us exploded. We sprinted along the spire's ribs, wind tearing at our coats, spray writing salt on our tongues. The 3 pieces of the Crown-Maw wriggled through the broken net with obscene grace, each choosing a different path along the arches of the court. Courtiers scuttled like beetles discovering the rock they love is also afoot. "Left," Tessari sent. I veered left. A maw snapped where my knee used to be and gulped a chunk of stone. The crunch reverberated through the spire like a bell rung by a fist. Tessari kicked a bead into the air and sliced it with her blade. It burst into static that stuck to one serpent's faces. It writhed, blinded by noise. "Veer!" Tessari shouted over the roar of the climbing river. "Help your court, and I'll forget for one breath that you aimed arrows at my doors." Veer, dainty as sugar, tilted her head. "I keep my arrows for people," she said, and loosed one at us. Tessari yanked me down. The shaft sang past, flirting with my ear. "So noted," Tessari grated. "Shadow, can you make the water sing?" "I can make it try." I pressed my palm to the spire's damp skin. The current shivered under my hand like a large animal deciding whether to be ridden. I fed it shapes, grid, cage, comb. It liked comb. It combed itself into bands that were there and not there, a barber's fingers through a saint's hair. The nearest serpent flowed through a band and stumbled as if someone had tripped its ideas. Tessari leapt, drove her humming blade into a mouth. The blade cut sound more than matter. The mouth unraveled with a wet, angry cord. The serpent split again, smaller now, twitching with leftover orders. "This is going to be very many snakes," I gasped. "Better 10 small than 1 large," she said, yanking me into a run as the Regent's man pointed his rod again. His recall note hit the court like static, souring wine. The pieces of the beast jerked toward the rent in the air overhead, only to be caught in the comb and slung sideways. "Your pet is underfed," Cyrith called, thumping her cane as if the floor had forgotten to be floor. "Feed it to an old law boy." He ignored her. "Bureaucrats are bred to ignore the right advice." He traced a sigil in the air. Veer shadowed him, fingers moving with hungry elegance, as if she could snatch authority out of his gestures and braid it into her tail. "Tess?" someone shouted. Tekka, of all miracles, leaning in a balcony, grease on her cheek, a grin like a busted streetlight. She hurled a box the size of a cat. It hit the spire near us and unfolded into a fan of metal teeth. The teeth chattered, hungry for frequencies. "Clamp it when you've got a note," she yelled. Tessari's eyes flicked, fascinated despite herself. "Shadow, give me the pitch the beast hates most." I tasted the air, listened to the way the serpent's breaths braided the hum of the spire. There, a sour harmonic each head flinched around. I whistled it, ugly as honesty. Tessari slammed the fan against the spire. It echoed the note while biting down, anchoring itself to stone. The sound lashed the serpents like a whip. 2 fled toward the rent, jerking, their bodies pixelating with the effort to obey. The 3rd surged up the spire toward us, mouths opening in a blossoming of gleaming hunger. Veer loosed another arrow. "Below," Tessari shouted. The matriarch stood, blue eyes gone pale with something like the memory of fear. "Call the right," Tessari bellowed at her, "or let the Regent's leash chew your throne." For one heartbeat, the matriarch hesitated, and you could see the Regent's hand on her shoulder in the way her jaw clenched. Then survival elbowed loyalty. She lifted her hands and sang the opening of the public reckoning. Voice thin but correct. The court answered, begrudgingly. Old law flowed in like a cold tide, stubborn and inexorable. The spire's water comb stiffened. The serpents wriggled, scales turning to numbers, and then to ash where the song touched them. The Regent's man bared his teeth, finally not smiling. He snapped the rod in 2. The recall tone doubled, drilling into bone. "Brace." Tessari hissed. The world tilted as a mouth the size of a doorway opened in the ceiling. And the biggest piece of the Crown-Maw fell through it like a promise we'd hoped he'd forgotten to keep. It hit the top of the spire, and the spire hit back. Stone boomed like a drum you struck with a car. Water leapt sideways in silver sheets. The air went wet and white. The beast shook itself as if shedding an invisible dog owner. Every mouth opened. The note it sang wasn't a note at all. It was subtraction. Of courage of spine, of the memory of how to run. "Don't listen," Tessari said, and bit my ear. The pain spiked, real and local. I clung to it, a nail hammered into a rattling house. "Drop," she sent, and we dropped, letting gravity drag us down the spire's ribs. The serpent lunged and hit the comb, confused by the way the water parted around it like fingers letting go. Cyrith's hum became a roar, the old woman's body a tuning fork planted in the floor of law. Tekka whooped and hurled another of her chattering fans. It bit the beast's flank and screamed in ugly harmony. "Basement," Tessari said. "See tunnels." Where the law started breathing. We ran. The court was an uproar, some fleeing, some fighting, some picking pockets, because old habits wear harder than new emergencies. The matriarch's song rattled. She lifted her chin and poured more volume into correctness. Veer shadowed us along the gallery, eyes narrowed, bow unbothered by the water that slicked its string. She had the look of a woman calculating which death would best dress her story. We slammed through a service door and into a corridor where the walls sweated. The stone here was older, scarred by hands that had not known clean. Tessari's claws ticked. I slipped twice and learned to run with my weight lower, boots eating water, breath tearing. "Talk to me?" I gasped, not wanting silence to let my brain invent too many teeth behind us. "Sea tunnels were where old law was hammered," she said, words clipped by breath. "Floods came. People learned to braid rope out of voice. Water listens if you speak the way gravity does." That sounds like nonsense? Yes. Keep singing nonsense. I sang shapes that suggested holes were doors, that the floor tilted kindly toward our feet, that the air thickened behind us like syrup. The tunnel obliged by being slightly more than indifferent. Behind us the beast slithered, tearing banners from walls no one had hung there. Its mouths argued with each other, a chorus of hungers negotiating. We burst into a cavern where the ceiling curved like the inside of a rib cage. The sea shouldered its way in through arches and lay panting on the stones. Cyrith hobbled in a side passage. Somehow they're ahead of us, Cain a metronome for a heart that refused to learn when to stop. She planted herself in a groove worn by generations and lifted her chin. "Circle," she croaked. Vashari, hunters and bakers and children who'd grown fangs today, stepped into places their grandparents had taught their feet. Humans slid into the gaps without being told. Tekka shoved a fan into a crack where an old hinge still remembered being doors. The circle closed like a mouth around a spoon. The beast poured into the cavern, wider now that the ceiling was lower, its shadow richer, its appetites tasting the salt and deciding to like it. Tessari grabbed my wrist and slashed my palm with her blade. Blood pattered into the tide. She did the same to her own. The mark burned, then cooled, then braided a heat between us that was not polite. "Name it," she said, eyes intent on mine. "Make it smaller." "Crown-Maw," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "Leash eater, recall worm, paper serpent, regent's pet." It bucked when I said pet. Tessari laughed, vicious and bright. "Good," she said, and began to sing. Not pretty, again, but intricate, a fisherman's knot taut to a wave. I added my low thread, rough as a rope that had chewed rocks. The circle answered. Cyrith's voice was a broken bell that arrows hissed. Veer's archers in the tunnel mouth, faces painted with righteousness. One shaft cut Cyrith's braid. Another kissed Tessari's cheek and left a bead of red that smelled like iron and pepper. Cyrith didn't flinch. "Hold," she snapped. "Not at the enemy, but at us." I held. The knife brightened until the letters on it were too much for my eyes. The water reached up, and for a ridiculous, holy second, I thought it would hold my hand. Then the biggest mouth of the Crown-Maw unrolled like a carpet of knives and took the circle's light in one swallow. The world lurched like a ship changing its mind. The circle's song collapsed into coughing. The beast's throat was a tunnel into subtraction. I could feel the vow tug toward it, thread yearning for a spool. Tessari grabbed my jaw, yanked my face to hers. "Don't let it take your first word," she said, and her breath was salt and ash and the bright penny stink of her blood. "What?" "The first word you ever spoke. It will eat your beginnings if you let it." I clenched my teeth and sang the opposite of my first word. A lie that became a splint. The tug slackened. Tessari's eyes flashed pride. "Good boy," she said, and spun away, blade cutting a shape in air that the water decided to copy. It rose in a ribbon, slick and improbable, and punched the beast in the nearest eye. The eye popped like a grape under a boot. Veer's arrow thudded into the cavern wall an inch from my ear. "Oops," she cooed. Her neck shaft aimed lower, for Cyrith's ribs. Time hiccuped. The old woman was not fast enough. My body moved before my thinking did. The mark yanked my muscles the way a puppeteer yanks silk. I slung the dust net knife. It spun once, twice, shouting bright. It struck the arrow mid-flight and made a note like a coin struck on stone. The arrow shaved Cyrith's sleeve and planted itself in the sand with a sullen thunk. Cyrith's head rotated toward the tunnel mouth with the slow relish of a crocodile noticing calves. "Veer," she said sweetly, "come sing with us." Veer smiled with all her teeth. "I don't carry that key." "Then be silent in a chapel you don't understand," Cyrith rasped, and the cane came down, hard. Old Law leapt, delighted to be remembered. The arches shook. The beast wavered. For a heartbeat we were inside the story that had invented us. The Regent's man, panting at the tunnel threshold, lifted the broken halves of his rod and pressed them together. They complained, but obeyed. The recall tone keened. The beasts' bodies quivered toward the ceiling rent, away from our circle, away from a law that tasted like fathers teaching sons not to drown. "Anchor," Tessari barked. I grabbed a coil of wet rope that had hung on that wall longer than the matriarch had worn her crown. Tessari whipped it around a pillar, the knot her hands tied as fast as thought. We leapt. The circle surged. The rope hummed tight, catching the beast around a lobe of meat that had forgotten it could be knotted. "Cole," Tessari breathed, and for a moment the fight narrowed to her mouth, shaping my name. "Do you trust me?" The question should have been too big for this moment. It fit perfectly. "Yes." "Share." She set her forehead to mine and shoved. The mark didn't so much open as turn inside out. My mouth tasted stone and salt and the copper of fear I recognized as not my own. My ears heard the beast from Tessari's angle, the way its voice slid on the bones of the cave. My eyes saw my own stupid face, braced and bloody and entirely present. For a heartbeat, we were one creature with 4 eyes and 2 scowls and a single sharp intention. "Now," she said, and we moved. The world flowed. We cut, not the beast. Its flesh argued and would for hours, but the sound holding it together. We severed a cord, and the Crown-Maw's nearest body screamed its arithmetic apart. Pieces fell twitching, numbers uncomplainingly going back to 0. The Regent's man cursed in a language that had too many honorifics for the emotion he wanted. He mashed a control. The rent in the ceiling widened like a yawn that had become a strategy. Gravity bent. My teeth ached. The rope snapped, shredding old promise and new effort. We slid backward, feet carving furrows in wet sand. The circle tore, people grabbing for each other, and only sometimes catching. The rent pulled like a tide with its mind made up. "Cut the leash," Tessari rasped, "or he'll drag us into his pocket and shake until only storied dust falls out." "How?" I shouted. "Find where it touches your vow." I closed my eyes to the wrong stars overhead and felt for the place the recall had its hooks in our bond. There, a barb just under the skin of the mark. I put my voice around it and bit. Pain detonated bright and stupid. My hands went white. My knees went elsewhere. And above us, far away and too close, the sky began to flash with the polite, deadly signatures of ships dropping out of lane. "Orbit," Tekka swore, eyes squinting at the new stars, bending into the wrong places. Someone brought a dinner bell. "The Regent," Tessari said, spitting blood into the tide like a tip. "He hates letting his pets dig their own holes." The cavern vibrated with distant landings. In the court above, the matriarch would be assembling a face to wear for this. In the tunnels below, the old law simmered, watching to see who would break their teeth on whom. The Crown-Maw, beaten smaller and madder, slithered along the wall toward the circle's weakest link, a boy with a voice going hoarse and a hand gripping his mother's sleeve like it was the last plank after a shipwreck. "Here," I said, stepping in, singing a lie that my throat had been made for this work. The beast struck and found the lie too sticky to swallow. It recoiled, mouths chattering, ink-black spit hissing in the seawater. Cyrith's breath sawed. She'd planted herself deep, but age is a thief with soft paws. "Little knife," she called to Tessari without looking. "When the ships spit soldiers, your cousin will dress their knives in law and call it justice. She will hang you by your vow and say she is saving you from your own stories." "I know," Tessari said, too calm. The cut on her cheek had crusted into a new bead. She worried it with her tongue and swallowed the taste of herself without a wince. "So we finish before they can tidy." "How?" I said. "This thing isn't a thing. It's a bad idea with teeth. Then we teach it a worse idea." She touched the beads at her tail's base. One was a flat disc of bone with a hole, old, smooth as prayer. She slipped it free and pressed it into my palm. "When I say, throw that into its biggest mouth and sing stay like you're talking to a dog who wants the road." "Why me?" "Because my voice cuts and yours binds. Because it likes you. I hate being liked by problems." "Welcome to marriage." The wren above convulsed. Something vast slid between clouds, a shadow with lights embedded like teeth in gum. The Regent's flagship? No. One of his handlers, all corners and wreaths. Smaller ships skimmed, dropping armored fleas toward plazas and roofs. An announcement bloomed in the air, translated badly by a machine that had only heard our language during arrests. "Remain in places. Help will be rendered. Deviance will be corrected." Veer's archers melted back as disciplined as ink and alcohol. Veer met Tessari's eye once, an acknowledgement that wasn't truce, and sauntered away to be useful to winners. "Now," Tessari whispered. The beast gathered itself, chose a largest mouth, and lunged, not at me, at Cyrith, because stories love to test the joints. Tessari leapt into the arc and spun, her blade scribbled a knot in air, and the water copied and looped. The mouth hit it and hesitated, not understanding why its edges had become questions. "Now," she hissed again, "not at me, through me." I threw the bone bead. Time stretched the way it does when you're deciding whether to be the sort of person who throws or the sort who flinches. The bead hit the tongue. The beast shuddered. I sang "Stay Like You Say It" to kids near traffic. The sound stuck under the bead, in the hole, in the throat. The mouth froze open. Tessari dove into it. My heart made an opinion I did not accept. She slid between teeth designed in a lab from old math and bad myths. She drove her blade upward with both hands, slicing the vowel out of the beast's name. It screamed not with pain, but with grammatical indignation. The bead's hole filled with light. The Crown-Maw convulsed, tearing itself around the stuck command. Mouths bit mouths. Tekka's fan shrieked. Cyrith's cane slammed one last time. The circle sang not beauty but belligerence. The beast folded the way paper does when you force it to remember it was once a tree. It blew apart, not into gore, into notation, into spent instructions that drifted down like black snow and melted into the sea. Silence slammed into the cavern so hard my ears rang with its echo. Tessari staggered out of where teeth had tried to be a door. Her armor was chewed and laughing about it. She wiped her blade on her thigh. It purred. Above, boots pounded, soldiers boiling down through the court, announcements repeating in voices trained to soothe while stealing. The rent in the ceiling flickered, uncertain now that its leash was dogless. "We won," I said, half in wonder, half in disbelief. "We won lunch," Tessari corrected. "Dinner is arriving with uniforms." Cyrith swayed. I reached for her. She smacked my hand away with offended dignity. Tessari's tail's beads clicked. One missing now. The gap felt like a tooth pulled. She looked at me, and the little smile that had begun to think about living on her face evaporated. "Shadow," she said. Very calm. We run. We ran. The tunnels were a throat clearing to spit us back into the court's mouth. We took a side artery only locals used, shoulders brushing glyphs cut shallow by hands who had thought no one would ever need them again. The mark between us had been scraped raw by recall. Now it thrummed, new edges sensitive as skin grown back over a scar. Left, Tessari sent. I didn't think, I turned. A soldier's baton kissed the air I'd abandoned and crackled with compliments meant for spines. Tekka appeared out of a maintenance hatch like a swear word, swung a wrench, and introduced a visor to the concept of humility. Get moving, romance, she snapped. Your ride hates waiting. Ride? I panted. Tekka calls any machine hers if it listens, Tessari said, skidding through a doorway as grenades clicked polite warnings behind us. Today we borrow her vanity. We burst into daylight like fish deciding to be birds. The court's outer terrace stretched and then dropped away into the blue throat of the sea. Aircars drifted above like lazy jellyfish. Between two statues arguing with wings, a courier sled hovered with all the charm of a brick with opinions. Its hatch yawned. Tekka lounged at the controls, chewing something that smelled like burnt sugar and moonshine. You look like death with a good tailor, she greeted. In. We flung ourselves aboard. The sled ducked. Bolts of officer-friendly electricity ionized the air where we had been. Tessari blew the matriarch a kiss. The matriarch didn't see it, or pretended not to. The sled dropped along the palace's spine and then punched sideways into traffic. Drones peeled off a handlership and came on like a word you're not allowed to say near children. Guns? I asked, hopeful. Swapped for speed, Tekka said. I regret nothing. She goosenecked the sled through a gap that had not existed when she chose it. Veer? Tessari asked without looking back. On a skiff with pretensions, Tekka said, tilting her chin. She's smiling like a cat that knows where the bowl is kept. The skiff arrowed from a higher terrace, black and sleek. Veer at its prow like a figurehead designed by someone who had never met mercy. She lifted a hand. The skiff spat a line that glittered and hissed. It bit the sled's flank and tightened with the busy enthusiasm of a strangler vine. She's grappling us, I said, unnecessarily but with feeling. Not for long, Tekka said, tossing me a case. Push the big ugly button when I say. What does it do? Makes me a liar. The line sang, a horrible, intimate sound of metal surprised by betrayal. Veer's skiff reeled us. Her smile said she had already composed the epitaph for our little rebellion. Soldiers poured along the terrace behind her, rifles ready, visors reflecting a sky that was tired of being reflected. Now, Tekka snapped. So I hit the ugly button. The sled shed its outer skin like a snake bored of winter. Panels popped, hinges screamed, and the entire left side of our craft slid away. The grappling line cinched tight around a thing that was no longer us. The sled yawed sickeningly. Wind punched my lungs. Veer cursed, pure and simple, in a dialect that made the salt blush. The skiff overcorrected, line dragging an empty shell. Tekka stomped the throttle. The sled leapt. Where? I yelled over a wind that wanted my words for its own. The wake, Tessari said, grinning like bad news. Again. The Regent's handlers don't like crumbs in their pretty carpets. The wake is all crumbs and bones. Sentinels still sleep there, I warned. They won't after we shout. Traffic thinned to the space between worlds. The sled's engine was a held breath. The atmosphere forgot us, and we forgot it. The black opened like a door without hinges. Behind, the skiff burned, Veer's rage a white needle. Handler drones kept pace with bureaucratic persistence. Above, a larger ship's silhouette rolled like a hungry thought. Cole, Tessari said, and I turned because my name in her mouth did that to me now. That knife. Mother Ashes? Keep it. It remembers our stupid promise. Stupid, I said, and smiled for real. Best kind. The sled dove into the lantern wake, stars smeared into grain. Gravity went soft and then particular. The sable lantern's dark underbelly loomed like a secret keeping its own counsel. Wake up, Tessari whispered to it, as if you could whisper to a mountain. Something answered. It didn't open eyes. It adjusted its indifference. A node extended from the lantern's flank like a limb, remembering it used to be a bridge. Not quite metal, not quite bone-grown architecture with patience and temper. It wasn't inviting us so much as deciding the air near us needed a different idea. Feet on deck, Tekka barked. If she bites, I want us all in one mouth. She? I said. She, Tekka repeated, patting the console. Machines gender themselves when you love them enough. We slid along the node, repulsors purring like cats appeased for now. Symbols flickered under our hull like phosphorescent algae in a wake. They were not Vashari. They were older. They tasted like language wearing stone as a mask. A shape unfolded from the node's end. A sentinel in the old style, not a robot, not a statue. Both. It moved the way cliffs move when you're patient. A centimeter, a quake, a century. Its face was a mask carved into the idea of a fox. Long ears upright, mouth undecided. Identify, it said, and didn't say, and rode into our bones. Tekka's fillings hummed. Tessari's ears flattened, not with fear. Respect edged in fear. I swallowed a shard of nothing and somehow got away with it. Tessari Nara, she said aloud, and into the quiet the sentinel cared about. Hunt bound to Cole Harrigan by vow under Mother Ash's knife. We call entrance by debt and sing under old law. Artifact key present, the sentinel murmured. Not to us. To itself. To the lantern. To the part of the universe that keeps lists of things it would rather not lose. Its head turned to me. Human voice. You carry harmonic contamination. That's new, I muttered. It likes your singing. Tekka translated, unhelpfully and accurately. State tithe, the sentinel said. The node brightened, as if the lantern was lighting a candle to see who was asking for favors this time. Titha? Tessari asked, jaw going tight. A memory, the sentinel said. An honest one. The lantern moves paths for those who feed her. No blood. No lies. No forgetting you forgot. Its stone ears quivered. Choose fast. The wake is not patient with your little chases. Behind us, Veer's skiff fought the wake's spite. Drones doubled, tripled, trying to average the field into numbers their programmers could sleep with. Veer stood on her prow, hair and tail wet with gravity static, and sipped fury like tea. She looked like a woman who would pry the lock off heaven just to peek. Her voice carried across vacuum, a tight beam whisper into our hull. Give me the human, the cousin, and I'll make the matriarch remember to love you. Tempting, Tessari called back, not sounding tempted. Ask again when I'm dead. I pressed my palm to the hull. The mark pulsed, raw and present. I'll pay, I said to the sentinel. Take something I can live without. Its stone head cocked. What can you live without that is honest? My uncle's laugh, I said, too fast. The sentinel's silence did not approve. It smelled like old books closed in disappointment. No, it said. You don't own that. Try again. Tessari touched my wrist. Anchor and yes. Her eyes were cats at night. Slit, huge, unsorry. Not your pain, she whispered. We need you mean. She turned to the sentinel. Take my prey name, she said softly. The first one I earned alone. The sentinel stilled. In the wake, stars paused politely. Harsh, it said, and fair, but insufficient. You ask a path to a throne room full of teeth. Bring better meat. Tekka spat into an empty cup. Has anyone tried tipping you? She asked. The sentinel ignored her with elegance. The ships above began to force the wake by throwing math at it until their math bled. Veer's skiff bucked. She laughed. She liked a mean fight. Drones tightened into a spear. We're out of time, Tessari said. The mark thudded, frantic. I closed my eyes and looked for a memory that was mine, whole and costly. Not my first word. The beast had already sniffed that. Not my first kiss. That would be cheap bravado. I looked at a kitchen window on Earth filtered through a summer too green to be real. My mother's hands. No, those were hers. The first time I felt safe, so safe I'd believed safety was the weather rather than a choice my parents made to stand between me and what shook the door. The sentinel's face was very close when I opened my eyes. There, it said gently, almost kind. That one tastes like clean water. I don't want. I began. That's why it works, it said. Choose. Tessari's hand tightened on mine. Shadow, she whispered. We hunt. We don't hoard. Let it go. I let it go. Something left me like a bird going out a window you forgot you'd opened. The absence it left was shaped like afternoons on a porch with shade that stroked your neck right. I knew. Path paid, the sentinel said. Use quickly. Your leashmaker smells you. Where does it go? Tessari asked. Where you ask, the sentinel said, and its stone mouth made a shape like a smile. To the regent's data arc, to the pocket where he keeps other people's maps. The node slid us into a pocket of space that had no business fitting where it did. Light skittered off the sled's canopy, embarrassed. For 5 breaths, we were a rumor. Behind, Veer's skiff lunged, bit emptiness, and found herself suddenly alone with drones who were not as good at being angry as she was. See you soon, her tight beam hissed, not so much a threat as a plan drafting itself. Tika blew her a kiss through the rear cam and flipped 3 switches that made the sled more or less legal by lying sweetly about its age. Data arc, Tessari murmured, eyes on the lane that wasn't. He hid it near the lantern to eat its breath. The old ones would laugh until they sharpened stones. What's a data arc? I asked, forehead cold against glass, the mark warm under my skin in apology for what I had paid. The absence inside me nagged. Where memory had sat, there was thoughtful emptiness I would need to learn to carry without staring into it too often. A vault of captured truths, Tessari said. He keeps names there, and maps, and the shapes of songs he cannot sing. He keeps my mother's hunts. He keeps your family's betrayal nailed to a board like butterflies. So we steal the board, I said. And the butterflies. And the pins, she said with relish. The lane spat us into a shadow that wasn't shade. The data arc hung in it, small as moons go, big as sins go. It was a nacreous oval wrapped in bands that pulsed like a sleeping throat. No running lights, no transponder, no welcome. Its surface shrugged off radar like conversation shrugged off the obvious. How do we knock? Tika asked, fingers dancing. I left my polite hat in a previous life. We don't, Tessari said. We sing the door it stole from the lantern. It taught its locks to recognize human throats. Shadow? I swallowed. My voice already felt worn. The sentinel's tithe still ached. A phantom porch. A missing shade. I can try. You can, she said, and her certainty folded around my doubt like a hand around a knife meant for throwing. I sang shapes, low and stubborn. The arc shivered. Bands loosened, then cinched, like a flinch turned into a shrug. I pushed into the note the vault and the lantern had liked best, the one that made glass remember it had once been sand under a sun that didn't care. The arc sighed. A slit opened. Air that had never been breathed exhaled secrets. Inside, Tika said, too loudly. Before someone different makes this their problem. The sled slid into the slit. We were in a chamber that felt like being inside a pearl. Light came from nowhere and everywhere. The walls were grooved with file architecture turned into art. Ridges, pits, a braille for machines. The floor didn't exist until we put our feet on it, then remembered it was a floor and acted accordingly. Gives me the creeps, Tika muttered, which was Tika for I'm impressed. My wrist tingled. The mark knitted itself a fraction tighter, trying to play nice with a place that wanted to unspool voice for cataloging. Tessari's ears flattened. He'll have hounds in here, she warned. Not bodies. Not drones. Ideas that bite. So no shouting, Tika said, restraining herself admirably. We followed a groove that felt like a corridor if you pretended walls were polite and corners didn't eavesdrop. Slot after slot hummed as we passed, tasting us with the delicacy of a connoisseur. In one, I glimpsed a map that moved like a fish. In another, a memory of a desert storm rewound, and replayed until the sand forgot which way it wanted to fall. There. Tessari breathed. The niche held a lattice of wire and light shaped like a laughing man's jawline, the echo of my great-uncle caught in a trap built for mirth. A label scrolled in a font that wanted to be a signature. HARRIGAN, trade in confidence compensated. Next to it, like a moth pinned next to its meal, a braid of Vashari beads, red and teal and black. Her mother's tally. My stomach turned to cold iron. Take them, Tessari said. Take him. Take every copy. I reached. The ark's hum rose, interested. The groove beneath my feet tried to tilt into a smile. A keening began, low at first. The sound of a lock telling you it has preferences. Fast, Taka warned. Something just told Mama we're in her pantry. I grabbed the lattice. It was warm the way a hand is warm after it's left a table. The wire flexed, reluctant, then decided to come if I kept asking nicely. Tessari plucked the beads, holding them as if they might go feral and bite. Her eye out of it poured a flavor of hound not built this side of a human throat, not crawling, not flying, a rumor with edges. It smelled like official letters and carpet glue in 2 clean hands. File wraith, Taka said, pale. Paper made mean. It tasted the lattice in my hand and smiled without mouths. Shadow, Tessari said, voice steady as bedrock. Make your uncle uninteresting. How do I rewrite his laugh? Her eyes flicked to mine, apology and permission. Make it boring. I don't. Do it, she said, and the wraith flowed closer, and the ark decided we were nouns it was done filing, and the door we'd sung open began to consider being closed. The file wraith slid from the wall like a policy turned into teeth. It made a pleasant rustling, paper on paper, as it folded itself tall. Letters scrolled across it in legalese and lullaby, a language that soothed you into letting it eat you. Make him boring, Tessari said again, low and urgent, beads clicking like hailstones against her collar. I can't unmake a man, I said. You can sand his edge. She shoved the lattice. The echo of my great-uncle, against my chest, round him. The wraith flowed closer, savoring the scent of scandal like butter. Taka lifted a little grenade that promised to be funny exactly once. Tessari shook her head. Noise feeds it. I breathed, and the mark warmed like a hand at my back. I remembered the sentinel taking my safe summer and leaving me the shape of wanting it. I took that hollow and poured it into the lattice, sang the laugh flat. Not cruel, compassionless. I stripped away the liquor sheen, the roguish tilt, the gold-toothed myth. I tuned him to. He did it because he was tired and the money was easy. I tuned him to. Men like this are common as screws. I tuned him to ordinary. The file wraith hesitated, its edges blurring. Its joy was collecting rare things. I had made the laugh a drawer full of mismatched spoons. It lunged past us instead, at our vow. Tessari hissed, half a laugh. Of course. She snapped a bead off her tail and crushed it in her fist. Resin dust skittered into the air like midges. The wraith's hunger snagged on the grit of old ritual, choked, reformatted its appetite, and found itself wanting salt. Chew this, Taka muttered, flicking her funny grenade underhand into the wraith's curl. It burst. No flame, just a hiccup of static that made monospaced fonts cry. The wraith wrinkled offended. Shadow, Tessari said, eyes on the wall slow tightening. Make the door remember it was sung open publicly, not stolen privately. File wraiths can't close what belongs to everyone. Public. I understood. I pitched my voice into the key of market cries and union votes and cliffside challenges. I sang the shape of a door as if I were teaching a roomful of strangers how to pass through it and tell their friends. The slit we'd used brightened, widened, sighed in relief at not having to be exclusive. The wraith snapped a corner at me like a clerk slamming a stamp. Tessari's blade spoke a syllable of refusal, paper shredded, and 1,000 tiny injunctions fluttered like moths. Alarms finally found the ark's dignity. Gravity shrugged harder. Band cinched. From the slit, a wind began, gentle, persistent, as if the Ark were inhaling to cork us. Copy? Teka barked. Copy, I said. I lifted the lattice and sang it into the dust net knife, into the iron that remembered our vow. The lattice resisted, then became lines in steel, a story pressed into a blade's mouth. Tessari, jaw clenched, poured her mother's beads into her palm and looped them around her own wrist. She didn't look at them. Looking would have been drowning. Go, she ordered. We ran. The wraith tried to write us as trespassers. The mark wrote back, witnesses. The Ark tried to fold the corridor into a filing cabinet. Teka kicked a rib in the wall. It spasmed into a bracket instead. Everything's a shelf if you ask wrong, she grunted. We dove through the slit as the Ark's mouth curled shut. For a breath I felt its breath on my neck, dry, papery, censorious. Then we were out, the sled coughing light, the wake snatching us up like a cat saving its least favorite mouse purely out of pride. Behind us, the Ark's bands flashed a warning to the ships above. Ahead, the sentinel's stone ears swiveled, amused. Did you steal well? It asked. We stole loud, Tessari said. Now we make it louder. The sentinel turned its mask toward a vein of dark in the wake and pressed it with one stone finger. We slotted into the path. The sled eased forward like a guilty thought. In the shadow of the lantern, reality makes shortcuts when it likes your cheek. The lane spit us out not in the court or the harbor or a safe alley with soup and sarcasm, but along the cliff where the caves were eyes and the wind was a choir that liked being rude. The cliff gathered faces as we arrived, hunters, weavers, children swinging their legs on ledges because nothing we did could convince them grace wasn't hereditary. Cirith stood, cane a flag, hair a thunderhead. Her eyes turned toward the sound of our engine as if she had invented it by naming it. Sing it, she commanded, before we'd finished landing. Make the Regent's Lock a key everyone owns. Tessari vaulted off the sled and took the cliffstone their ancestors had blunted with the soles of their feet. She lifted the dust net knife. The iron hummed, heavy with stolen lines. I stood beside her and pressed my palm to the blade, felt my uncle's laugh, felt its new dullness, felt the story turn from myth to warning. We sang. Not pretty. Public. The cliffs picked it up like gossip and hurled it inland. The longhouse breathed it. The caves repeated it in lower registers, adding the grain of stone. Voices stood in windows and added ingredients. Jokes, curses, names, bargains. The air thickened with participation. The Ark's stolen maps unfolded from the knife into sound and then image. Routes the Regent controlled by leash and ledger. Pockets where he socked away stolen truths. The way his drones listened with one ear to him and one to the old law in case they needed plausible deniability later. The beads tally, Tessari's mother's hunts, streamed across the sky in a ribbon of color. Each mark flared like a heartbeat. The last was a black thread cut too soon. Truth's not a blade, Cirith shouted over the wind. It's a tide. Stand or drown. Inland bells rang. Not polite court bells. Alarm bells run by hands. Ships shifted in the sky like guilty men rearranging their jackets. The matriarch's edict voice tried to stand between us and our own sound. It read from a script that tasted like carpet glue. The cliff laughed in her face. Laughter is a tool, too. Veer's skiff burned down the coast, sleek as hypocrisy. She stood on the prow, bow unstrung, hair whipped into punctuation. She watched our broadcast with a look both hungry and ill, like a cat watching someone open the wrong can and finding it appetizing anyway. Choose, Tessari yelled at her over the sea, collar or throat. Veer's lips parted. The answer lay there, sharp and expensive. Before she could spit it, the sky parted to let a handler drop its swaggering shadow. The Regent's emblem hung on it like a sign on a kennel. A voice made of desks and stairs boomed. Cease unlawful assembly or be corrected. Cirith bared her teeth. Correct this, she said, and her cane came down like a judge not tired of judging. Old law surged, delighted to be useful. The handler's grav wobbled. The sea made combs again, not to catch a beast this time, but to slap a ship. It worked, badly and beautifully. The handler listed like a drunk told to stand straight. Drones poured from its gut in a glitter a greedy god might mistake for praise. Hold the song, Tessari shouted, not to me, past me, into the crowd. Hold it while we cut. We ran for the skiff we didn't own. Vir watched us approach, expression unreadable. She didn't lift her bow. She didn't move aside either. Tessari didn't slow. She vaulted the gunwale, landed with rude grace, and met Vir's eyes a breath away. "Cousin," Vir said. "Cousin," Tessari returned, and then they hit each other. It wasn't the kind of fight that pauses for applause. It was quick and mean and intimate. Two women who knew each other's first mistakes and last nerve. Vir's hands were elegant until they weren't, until they were knuckles. Tessari's blade hummed alleys into the air till Vir twisted, caught her wrist, used the boat's tilt like an ally. I went for the skiff's controls because romance with violence is a hobby and piloting is survival. Tekka belly flopped in after me, swore like the ocean, and yanked a panel off the dash with her teeth. "You fight," she told the cousins. "I'll make your fight mobile." "Stay," Vir commanded me without looking. "Sit," I suggested back, and threw the skiff into a sideslip that made both of them grab for rail and each other. A drone stunner bolt kissed air where Vir's ear had been a moment ago. "She didn't thank me," she glared better. Above us, the handler hissed down a recall tone that had nowhere to go now that we'd cut its leash earlier. The tone slithered along the cliff, looking for law it could bully. The cliff spat and kept singing. "The public is rude when you do it right." Vir's bow had skittered to my foot. I kicked it toward her. "She didn't thank me for that either." The mark flared. Tessari's pulse, hot and furious and hopeful. The drones were coming in a wall now, trying to smother us with competence. "Vir," I snapped, hating the unfamiliarity of her name in my mouth. "If he corrects us now, your matriarch is nothing but a nameplate on his office door." Vir froze, the truth landing like a coin with an insult on it. Then she moved, fast, clean, not at Tessari, at the sky. She strung her bow. She drew. The arrow sang with a frequency that said, "I belong to a grandmother who hit storms." She shot the handler's intake, not to kill, too arrogant to die fast, to make it cough. It coughed. It staggered. Its wall of drones lost cohesion the way arguments do when someone laughs at the right word. Tessari stumbled, not expecting the help. Vir caught her elbow. Their eyes met for a bright, complicated heartbeat, love and rivalry, and the knowledge that one day they'd probably try to do this again without an empire watching. "Go," Vir said, voice raw. "Break his teeth while he's complaining about his lip." We went. The skiff leapt under Tekka's blasphemous repair work. We tore across water toward a causeway that led into the court's underbelly. Drones chased. I sang a speed lie into the engine. It brightened into an honest whine. The causeway gate remembered me from the last time I'd been a problem and tried to be offended. I sang public at it. It blushed and opened like a door mistaken for a stage. We shot into corridors spitting with sprinklers and arguments. The court's belly felt the old law vibrating and tried to pretend it had wanted this all along. In the hall we'd fled earlier, the matriarch stood as if nailed to the floor by dignity. Her blue eyes looked tired enough to be human. Soldiers bracketed her with guns up and faith down. The regent's man, damp and fuming, held his rod like a broken promise. "Stop," he commanded, as if his word could fix gears by reminding them they were cogs. "Correct this," I said, and flung the dust net knife end over end at his nice uniform. He flinched, too slow, too late, exactly right. The blade bit the rod. The recall tone that had nowhere to go found the nearest leash. His throat. He choked on his own authority, eyes bulging with the sudden memory of not being in charge of gravity. Tessari walked up the middle of the hall like a person who had decided it was hers. Cyrith limped in behind us. Tekka at her shoulder. Vir arriving late and dramatic. Bow nowhere, hands clean. The song from the cliffs poured through the windows like weather coming indoors. "The public reckoning," Tessari said. "Clear. Now." The matriarch's mouth opened, closed. Her eyes met mine, blue and pinned with the regent's signature. She could say yes and maybe live. She could say no and cut the throat of the story that fed her kind. She said, very softly, "Now." Reckonings under old law are not polite, they are not orderly. They are not safe for shoes. They are honest, and honesty is messy. We made a circle not as pretty as the sea caves, but good enough to make the floor remember what circles are for. The public, courtiers, cooks, guards with visors lifted, because seeing is a kind of law too, stepped in, shoulder to shoulder, bristling and afraid and eager in that way people are when they hope for a different future and dread having to help build it. Tessari planted her feet and named the charges in a voice that caught on nothing: collusion with handlers, a rasher of old law, permitting the leash colossus in a court of hunters, selling hunts as entertainments to the region's collectors. She lifted her cut cheek like an emblem. And cowardice, she said, and somehow made it not an insult, but an invitation to stop. The matriarch stood and let the words hit her. She shrugged no blame yet, rolled no guilt off herself, wore her crown like a woman who had weighed it and found it heavy. I allowed new law to keep bellies full, she said. I believed a little leash would keep us safe from wolves. I was wrong. Gasps, snorts, a laugh that tasted like tears. Cyrith's cane thumped approval, shockingly gentle. The regent's man, purple with recall bite, wheezed, "You do not have jurisdiction," and found how silly that sounded in a room full of people who had decided otherwise. Tessari lifted the dust net knife. "This holds maps stolen from our dead," she said. "This holds a name we will not sing pretty anymore. This holds my vow to a human who is now our witness." She held my eyes, and I spoke too, about pirates and tombs and sentinels who barter in honest memories, about a pet made of math and policy, about how you make a leash out of secrets, and how you cut it with— "Strip the puppet's strings," a baker called. "Open the regent's pocket," a child chimed, solemn. "Make the matriarch answer without handlers in her ear," said Veer. And the way she said it was not kind, but it was fair. The matriarch lifted her chin. "Do it," she said. "Sing me clean or find someone else to hold this ugly bowl." Cyrith raised her cane. Not a sword, not a seal touched it to the matriarch's shoulder. Old law leapt like sparks from crust to crumb. Blue washed out of the matriarch's eyes like dye from cheap cloth. She shuddered, caught herself, stood straighter. The room exhaled as a body. Even the regent's man forgot to look composed. Overhead, the handler ship coughed and listed. On the cliffs, the sea combed. In the data arc, the file wraith found its drawers full of public and sulked itself to tatters. "And him?" someone asked, pointing with their chin at the regent's man. "Let him carry a message," Tessari said. "Tell your regent we're chewing." He tried to smile. It fell off. He made another expression, new, unpracticed, respect maybe, or the animal knowledge that the ground was now interested in his ankles. He backed away, rod drooping, collar suddenly heavy without a system to hold it up for him. "Veer?" the matriarch said, voice dry as clean bones. "If I fall, will you climb into my place and wear a law that bites?" Veer opened her mouth for mockery and found, instead, an answer with corners. "I will hold it," she said grudgingly, "until it burns my hands. And I will not pretend it doesn't burn." "Good," Cyrith said, pleased. "Honesty's hotter than carpets." The public laughed, and the laugh fed the law, and the law settled like dust that makes a house smell like a place you can live in. We did not get a parade, we got a list. Repairs, bridges to mend, bodies to count, names to carry to the cliffs and into the caves, to be laid where wind and stories could work on them. The handler ships limped off, not defeated so much as corrected in front of witnesses. The regent would choke on that more than on 1,000 dead drones. Teka stole 2 helmets and a case of coils and gave the helmets to kids who'd been brave because that's how you grow mechanics. The sentinel in the wake rotated an ear and pretended not to have helped. The sable lantern slept with one eye open. We climbed to the longhouse. Tessari set her mother's beads on a shelf. She did not touch them. She did not cry. She stared, tail still, ears a little too forward. Cyrith said nothing for a very long time, then reached without fumbling and put her palm over Tessari's hand. "Debt paid?" I asked softly, because my tongue had grown tired of not asking. Tessari glanced at the knife, at the beads, at the mark that had stopped throbbing and settled into a steady strange like a third wrist pulse. Deaths mutate? She said. They breed. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters. But her mouth softened. You want ceremony? Fine. She turned to Mother Ash, who had appeared like mold on bread, benign and inevitable. Crone, Tessari said, respectful and rude in the way affection learns to be. We bound under need, binded under choice. Mother Ash threaded her needle through air and tugged. The dead stirred to listen, because they're nosy. You want the same vow, but deeper. Fool children. Not the same, Tessari said. A different one, no throne, no court. Hunt right, yes, but also home right. My breath hit some part of me I hadn't realized had been braced since we met. You're asking me to stay, I said, unnecessarily and grinning like I just remembered a joke I loved. I'm telling you if you leave, I will follow and drag you home by the wrist, she said, ears doing a thing I was beginning to recognize as embarrassment. Mother Ash pricked our thumbs as if we hadn't bled enough. She knotted dust in the air. Repeat, she ordered. We did. I bind my hunt to yours because I want to, we said, words like bread, like knives. I stand where you can't reach without me, and you do the same stupid miracle for me. I will not waste what we paid to learn each other. The dust sank into the knife. The room breathed. Outside, the sea made a sound like approval. Done, Mother Ash sighed, teaching children to tie better knots in storms. This is my hobby. Tessari turned to me. Husband, she said, deliberately teasing the human mouth on the Vashari word. She reached and, very deliberately, touched her forehead to mine without the push of a vow, without the pinch of a leash. It was just skin, and it was very much everything. Cyrith coughed. Enough, she said. From the doorway, Veer leaned, arms folded, tail a question mark that had not decided to hook into a smile. Don't die, she told us, very seriously. If anyone gets to kill you, it's probably me. Fair, Tessari said, and tossed her a bead. Ver caught it, glanced at the scratch in it. Story she hadn't earned, and put it in her hair with practiced arrogance. Go, Mother Ash said, shooing us out into cold air that smelled like beginnings. Bring me better gossip when you return. Night took the cliff in patient bites. The longhouse lights burned like small stubborn stars. We stood on the edge where we'd shouted the public into being and looked out at a sea busy writing new combs we hadn't ordered. The mark lay quiet under our skin, warm and companionable, not a leash, more a string tied around a finger to remember something important. What now? I asked, because humans ruin good quiet with necessary questions. Now we hunt, Tessari said, simple. Not just beasts and drones, but habits. Not just handlers, but the tricks of thinking that let leashes look like jewelry. That sounds ambitious. That sounds fun, she smiled, bright in the dark. The Regent will come back with prettier lies. We will need shinier truths. And your pack? I asked, softly, the absence a shape at her shoulder. She tipped her face to the wind, let it comb her ears. I'll braid new names into my tail, she said. Yours is first, Cyrith's last, because she will refuse the honor and then sulk she wasn't asked. Veer? Veer is a storm we'll sail with until she decides to be weather again. She helped. She will want payment. We will pay and not kneel. Teka pinged us from the sled, her voice a grin. Romantics. Stop making the cliff blush. I found you a signal, thin as a hair, old as a grudge, the Regent's pocket twitches. We can follow it like a thread to where he keeps the map of who he thinks we are. Tessari's tail snapped once, delighted. See? Jars everywhere. We turned from the sea. The night broke around us into roads. The sable lantern was a shoulder against our backs. The wake murmured a song for people too stubborn to choose easy lanes. Behind us, the cliff kept singing the public into the cracks. Shadow, Tessari said, as we jogged toward the sled. Huntress, I answered. Do you regret the shocking part? She asked, playful, nervous in a way you only notice when you've learned a person's edges. Marrying you in a temple that smelled like salt and defiance, I said. Only that we didn't steal better wine for the toasts. She laughed, the sound biting the night. My uncle's laugh lay quiet and ordinary where I'd left it. "We'll fix that too," she promised. "We'll steal a bottle right off the regent's table." "And a jar," I said, "because Cyrith would scold us if we forgot." "And a jar," she agreed solemnly. We launched into the dark, a sled with 3 engines and too many opinions. The sentinel twitched an ear as we passed. The data arc sulked. The handler ships licked their paperwork wounds. On the cliff, the longhouse window held 2 lights burning, one for the lost and one for the fools out hunting. We were the second light. We intended to drag the first back with us, 1 bead, 1 map, 1 song, 1 broken leash at a time. The lane opened, rude and generous. We took it, laughing. And far ahead, where the sky tilts a little wrong, something smiled that thought it was a god. It was only a man with too much paper. We had a knife that remembered our names. We went to teach him how to bleed.